Get ready for the ultimate watch revelation. Today we're diving into the staggering surge in value of Cartier watches. With looking at this video of Theo and Harris, we specifically take a look at the tank and cabriolet models. In just a decade, these timepieces have skyrocketed in price, shaking up the entire luxury watch market. Did you know the Reverso was originally a sports watch, and the cabriolet? Its mind-blowing flipping mechanism sets it apart in a way you have to believe. With celebrity influence driving demand, the vintage models are now selling for jaw-dropping amounts, leaving many enthusiasts on the sidelines. And let's not forget the revolutionary masterworks, where watch investments parallel the art world. Let's take a look and dive in.
Today we're talking about one of the craziest investments in watches of the last 10 years, and really how it's kind of ruined in many ways what was once a very simple, relatively speaking, but amazing watch for the masses. This whole story actually starts with, I think, with the watch I'm wearing. This is a Reverso by JLC, and we'll go hands-on with this towards the end of today's episode, and I'll show you this watch and what makes it so beautiful, and I'll flip it around up close, and I'll tell you why I own it and what makes this particular piece so special, again, towards the end of the video. But this story really does start with this watch. It starts back in 1931 when JLC released the Reverso. You see, while today the Reverso is considered a dress watch, back then this was actually a sports watch. There was no Submariner at the time. There weren't watches like we know today that were built to be beaten up the way we think sports watches are now, right? Their whole perspective was different. So what was the Reverso? The Reverso was a watch that could be flipped over as to protect the, relatively speaking, delicate acrylic that protected the dial. Now, this was specifically useful for polo players between the balls and the mallets and the jumping and the horses and everything were particularly likely, I suppose, to have damage to their wristwatches, and the Reverso was the solution. Now, that was in 1931, but just the next year, in 1932, another very famous brand released something pretty comparable. It was the Cabriolet, as it was then called, by Cartier.
I really want to highlight that ultimately the timeless appeal of pieces like the Reverso, with its rich history and craftsmanship, underscore the notion that quality will always attract collectors, even as prices fluctuate. This is a really thrilling time for watch lovers and collectors alike, as the market evolves in ways that reflect broader cultural and economic trends. And let's take a look.
This was a watch that, unlike the Reverso, which flipped from side to side, actually had a vertical flip in this really neat system. I actually think the Cartier Cabriolet even seemed like a more complicated and intricate watch, and in turn, a more amazing watch. And now, keep in mind, the Cartier Cabriolet, as opposed to the Reverso by JLC, was always produced, even until today, in impossibly small quantities. Now let's back up a second, just to give you a sense of proportion here. Between the years 1920 and 1960, Cartier only manufactured 2,000 tank watches. Imagine that? 2,000 tank watches in all of those years. Now when a brand says something is limited production, that means that somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 pieces are manufactured and ready to be sold immediately. They are limited is really only a marketing attempt, right? Whereas with these Cartier tanks of the era, the ability to produce these delicate and intricate watches, not to mention their market demand, everything was just smaller, right? It was a very, very different world. Today, it seems that, in the words of John Goldberger, a great collector, great watches are far rarer than money, right? But back then, money wasn't as abundant as it seems to be today, particularly in this post-COVID boom, right? Which has greatly impacted the watch industry and made us all so impatient and all of these increases in value. It's wild. we'll get there in the story in a little bit. So let's fast forward. We know the history. We understand the quantity, right, that so few of these Cartier cabriolets were manufactured. Exact numbers are not known, but it is the belief of collectors and students that we're talking about a very, very small handful, which has created this remarkable allure around the brand, right, kind of mystery around the brand. Now, what separates the cabriolet from the tank is the tank, unlike the cabriolet, during the 1980s.
You know, really, the recent surge in the value of Cartier watches, especially the iconic tank and cabriolet models, is nothing short of remarkable. Over the last decade, these timepieces have transformed from accessible luxury items into highly sought after collectibles. Everything has been completely reshaped, and the entire market dynamics have changed. It's fascinating to see how the tank's enduring popularity, alongside its history, have really driven prices skyward.
80s and 90s and 2000s, 2010s, manufactured the tank en masse, right? While there were many decades of very small production numbers, there did come the day where Cartier would, from then on, make tanks at scale of all different metals and of all different qualities of construction, all different movements, right? From quartz to manual to automatic, from yellow gold and white gold to platinum to sterling silver and gold plated, right? There's a multitude of tanks at all different points in the price spectrum. And what that does is, while it certainly makes the model more famous, the sheer quantity limits the ability for those watches, even the great ones, to increase in value so remarkably, right? Because there are so many people that can say, I could just get the quartz one for $6,000, right? Or I can just get the gold-plated one for $2,000, right? So many people can have their thirst for a tank quenched by thousands of pieces of inventory at any moment. But the cabriolet is not the same. It was reintroduced by Cartier for a brief time, I believe in 1999 that began, and they were manufactured in both common metals, like stainless steel, and in quartz, as well as mechanical, and then of course also precious metal models, yellow gold, white gold, platinum, etc. But the production on these models, particularly the special models, the yellow golds, those precious metals, those production numbers were very limited. But those stainless steel models were produced, relatively speaking, en masse, which is...
You know, the cabriolet with its unique flipping mechanism really stands out within the watch world. It's very distinctive, but yet very simple and elegant.
Such an odd thing because it had never happened before. You see, at that point in 1999, Cartier had never even manufactured a stainless steel tank yet. Yes, they had manufactured the gold-plated, so they had produced an entry-level tank, that is true. But this stainless steel tank, right, was first seen in the form of the cabriolet, but now rebranded. It was no longer called the cabriolet. Market research, I suppose, dictated that the term should be the Basculante. And for years, the Basculante was available. For years, when I got into the watch industry, you could get a Basculante in quartz for around $2,000, maybe even less, maybe $1,600, right? You can get a mechanical Basculante for maybe $3,000, right? Relatively speaking to the vintage world of watch collecting, particularly within brands held in high esteem, and add even further, interesting models with a flipping function, right, with great lineage, these watches were no-brainers. And the reason that they were able to kind of sustain there were two reasons. Number one, because they were stainless steel and they were produced in mass, it would have taken so many, interested new inbound buyers into that market to change the market, to change that value, to increase it, right, exponentially. But also, at the time, going back 10 years, we've been in this industry now, dress watches were not as in vogue as they are today. And that's changed, right? We have influencers from Tyler, the Creator, who has done wonders for the Cartier market. I mean, even Kanye West has worn a crash. So many different major celebrities and influencers have been a part of the Cartier revival, right? And the Cartier revival has naturally impacted the weirdest models most.
What's interesting is that the role of celebrity influence in reviving interest in Cartier. As public figures embrace these timepieces, it elevates their status and desirability, even beyond like what the brands can do themselves. It really turns them into must-have accessories. However, this like newfound demand has also led to like many vintage models fetching astronomical prices, which of course can be a very double-edged sword for enthusiasts. You know, but many original fans are now finding themselves priced out of the market, altering the landscape of watch collecting and making accessibility a pressing issue for those that really care about that and find it troublesome. But however, it does increase desirability and it makes it more fascinating and it makes it more of a cool, enthralling space to actually be in. And isn't that kind of the whole point, is to have these items that are rare and have mystique and are highly coveted? I think so.
Crash, the bamboo Cousin, and what we're talking about today, the Basculante. These watches were trading for $2,000 to $3,500 for years. Anyone that wanted one could get one at any time, right through a vintage watch shop or, truthfully, on eBay. And then everything changed, right? The influencers, unintentionally, of course, they were just sharing their enthusiasm, changed everything. Now a Basculante is a $10,000 watch without breaking a sweat. A really good one can go up to 20, 25 without even getting into the vintage world. You get into the vintage world, and one went viral pretty recently, and it's $60,000. These watches, you couldn't give them away for a fraction of that price just 10 years ago. Nobody wanted a Basculante. Right? I don't even know if I know one person that decided to buy a Basculante for themselves and keep it in their collection long term. And now it's one of the hottest watches. Everything has changed. We talk about investment in watches, particularly on the really, really high end of the spectrum, you know, fairly often. And it's interesting, but it's almost irrelevant, right? I mean, ultimately, so many of us are not going to be buying $100,000, $200,000 vintage watches. It's all insane. It goes into the millions, right? But the Basculante is just an example that kind of does upset me a little bit, and it's all okay. God knows I'm a free market capitalist, and God knows nobody should change the value of these things, but it doesn't mean we can't be sad about it, right? I mean, when a great family restaurant closes because no one's going anymore, it's sad. It's fair, but it's sad. And when a great watch that used to be kind of affordable and could be gettable for any enthusiast, relatively speaking, or many, many enthusiasts, you know, relatively speaking, can no longer be attained, right? And now is kind of exclusively for, you know, people with significant disposable income, right? It does suck. Certain fair realities suck to know, you know, and this is certainly one of them. And the reason I position this video about investing in watches isn't because I'm necessarily telling you to now go buy these expensive watches because they're going to go up. That's not my point. My point is that we should all be, as enthusiasts, observers and aware of these market trends, because these watches, particularly in this world of vintage Cartier, are remarkable even just to study. Right, even just to study the auction page and admire, even though the $100,000 may be out of our budget. I mean, it's certainly, you know, not something that I'm bidding on. It's remarkable. It really has followed the art world in many ways and become so unaffordable, which really brings us to our sponsor for today's video, our friends over at Masterworks, who are democratizing investment in collectible art. Masterworks gives you the chance to invest in shares of multi-million-dollar paintings by the world's most important artists like Banksy, Basquiat, and Picasso. Masterworks has actually sold over $55 million worth of art, and the net proceeds have been paid out to over 62,000 investors. And those 62,000 investors weren't art experts. They didn't need to be, because Masterworks guides the way.
That's pretty incredible. I'm not going to lie. I definitely want to look at that later on and learn more about it.
Expertise in the collectible art world guide investment and take away all the pressure of the analysis. It's amazing what they've done. Now, the world of art investment is not new. Last year, the big three auction houses posted revenues of $17.7 billion combined, which has actually been the best year ever, but again, not new. The statistics have been updated recently, and blue chip whole contemporary art has now outpaced the S&P 500 for the last 27 years, and not by nothing, by an impressive 136%. 20%. So if you're interested in exploring the world of investment in truly collectible art, I highly recommend you go ahead and check out Masterworks. Now, there's a huge line to sign up to become a Masterworks investor, but because we sent you, you can skip that line. So head on over now and skip the line, sign up for a Masterworks account, and take a look for yourself. So that's the story of the Cartier Cabriolet and Basculante. We fit a lot in there, but I want to talk about this Reverso now, right? Let's go back to that beginning. Let's go back to 1931. Now, in 1931, this watch would have been impossible, and it would have defeated the entire purpose of the Reverso, right? And for two reasons. A, it is a Reverso duo, which means it has two dials, and these two dials can be set in their hour hand independently, right? You can actually track two different time zones with this watch. So the reason this would have been impractical and defeat its own purpose back then is because, the Reverso itself couldn't function. If the whole purpose of the Reverso is to have one solid case back that protected the time, right, the crystal, and you have two dials, right, there's no hiding. There's no hiding from the danger of your polo playing. So that would have been the beginning, right? That would have been the first reason why this watch would have made no sense. But second, it would have been possible, of course, for many reasons, but among them because the crystal is sapphire. So the Reverso no longer has the problem that ultimately led to its invention, right? Sapphire crystals do not crack in the way that acrylic does, right? These watches are far more durable. These watches can take far more of a beating. Of course, you want to get into the details of it. I'm sure these cases are much stronger and the flipping mechanisms are much better, and technology has improved the Reverso exponentially over the years, and that's great. But one of the beautiful things about the Reverso is, unlike the Cartier Basculante or Cabriolet, the Reverso has been made in fairly large quantities and in all different, right, configurations: stainless steel, two-tone, yellow gold, rose gold, all these different things, white gold, all these different models, right? So many have been made, right, since the 1980s specifically, that the sheer quantity in the market makes it prohibitive for such, for influencers to just, increase the value so terribly, right, exponentially, and I believe they will always increase year over year. I do think you'll always see mobility in the Reverso market. They're great watches, and great examples and great models will always be collectible. They will not reach Basculante prices. I don't think that you'll have that crazy turn of events, right, again, en masse, where Reversos double, triple, quadruple in value, right? Even for the standard ones. And moreover, if you have a tolerance for, watches on the smaller side, you can get a Reverso for a fraction of the price that you might think you go into the store and see. Because for so long, in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, those smaller proportions were, in style. And now, while they're going back, or for so long, they haven't been. So those watches were neglected. They were considered, the ladies' Reversos, even though they weren't. Maybe unisex, sure, but the ladies' ones were much, much smaller, So those watches represent a ton of value. Now, my particular Reverso is a duo face. This watch naturally is in white gold. I'm a big precious metal guy. I bought this watch when I was on a golfing trip with Sam here, and I admittedly was I was tired. I was drinking. I wasn't drunk, but we had been drinking. I found the watch and I bought it, and I didn't intend to keep it per se. I just saw it and said, "Oh, I got to get that. This is a great price." I think I paid about $9,000 for it, which was a really good price, relatively speaking. This watch is probably worth about $13,000 or $14,000 serviced. So I said, I'll buy it, I'll wear it, and I'll sell it if I don't like it anymore. But the reality of watch collecting is, once you get something that in all likelihood you'll never buy again, if you find one, they're going to be really expensive, and that you got it at a really good price, and you don't want to miss up that opportunity. And that's kind of where I am with this watch. I don't wear this watch as often as I should because I'm so afraid of developing a truly emotional attachment to it, and I don't really need it. It makes me feel a little bit guilty. I kind of bought it really without thinking at all, so I do feel a little bit guilty about it. But I suppose on the other side of it, who cares? Life is short. It's a beautiful thing, and this is the Reverso. If I've ever worn a Reverso that I truly loved, this is it. So I think dare I say, might even be irresponsible for me to sell this one. And I hope that you enjoyed this story, both the historical part and now my personal. And if you like this video, go ahead and like it. If you'd like to have more content from Theo and Harris, go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon over at The Zero. The link is down below. It's an amazing place. We release content and podcasts every week, and it's beautiful content. It's behind the scenes. It really talks about the watch industry, longer form and unfiltered. So I think that you'll love it. You also get, credits to the Theo and Harris Strap Shop. So your membership there, while not free up front, is basically free over the year. You get so much in credit. So head on over, take a look. I hope to see you on over there. And if you do join,
plenty of great content from Theo and Harris. So I recommend following them, and I recommend continuing to watch their videos. I think that one of the cool things about their channel is that they really talk about the love of watches, and they talk about the history of watches and very obscure, classy looking designs, anything from inexpensive to ultra luxury. So take a look. Again, this is Daniel with Chronosapien, and have a good day. Thanks.